Hi, everyone. I am Kelly. This is Uncorked History. Welcome to Women's History Month, March. We're excited to be with you. Hi, Jamie.
Hi.
It's March.
Yay. Although, I don't know if I should be excited about it or not. So much to do and not
Time
enough
marches
time.
on.
Yeah. Yeah. So how are you guys?
Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
I am
We are-
excited. I'm so excited because I adore Candace. Oh, Candace is amazing. If you have not been following Candace on Twitter, you are severely missing out. Also, she is a bright light in my Twitter ohana. So welcome, Candace. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us tonight.
Likewise. Glad to be here.
Yes, I have gotten the joy of speaking with Candace twice already, I believe. So Candace was on Unsung History with me many, many months ago. And we also did a really cool event, a Teach Truth webinar that was part of the Zen Educational. They had a Teach Truth Day weekend, I don't know, whatever it was. But that was
Yeah.
a very, very great event, which I think we might need to continue sometime soon because there is clearly some people
Clearly.
against teaching the truth.
Clearly.
Clearly.
I mean, wow. I thought that was a low point back then.
No,
And
they were
I
just
was
getting started.
incorrect. I was wrong.
Yes. So, what is everybody drinking?
I got some red wine
Very
from
nice.
my wine subscription with something called FirstLeaf. They send you 6 bottles for however often you want. Mine is normally once a month.
Nice.
Which is more of wine than I can really drink, but it's also good to have some on hand to grab as a gift.
There you go. Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a challenge, more wine than you can drink. So I think Jamie and I are both rocking the Shoe Crazy wine tonight.
Yes. I have 2 kinds because it's Thursday. Why not? So I have the Shoe Crazy Pink Rose Sangria, which is absolutely divine. It tastes like pink lemonade. So I could probably consume that whole bottle and not even realize it because it literally tastes like you are drinking juice. It is awesome.
You'd
I
realize
also
it the
have-
next day, probably.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I would feel that for the next 3 days. I also have the Shoe Crazy Cabernet Sauvignon, which I misread and thought it was a Cabernet Sangria. So it's been in my fridge. It's the only time I've ever chilled Cabernet Sauvignon before. And I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad about it.
Good to
Yeah.
know. I am drinking the Shoe Crazy Chardonnay, which is very good. It's a little bit lighter than some other Chardonnays, but in a nice way. I like it a lot.
Nice. Well, to get us started, I thought we would have Dr. Cunningham tell us a little bit about yourself as my dogs knock stuff over. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you get started? What is it that you research and what got you into that?
Well, I also have a dog, which if everyone who follows me on Twitter knows, she makes appearances on a regular basis. So my research is on Black school teachers who are in the civil rights movement, and I focus on South Carolina. And I think like a good research project, I kind of fell into it. I was doing some research actually for a professor, and I was looking at the NASP papers, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Some of their papers that are in the South Caroliniana, which is the archive at the University of South Carolina. And so I was like actually looking through they have all of their like pamphlets from their annual conferences in South Carolina. And they kept mentioning these cases, there were 3 cases they kept mentioning. One was in Charleston, South Carolina in World War I. And it was the city of Charleston did not hire Black teachers in their city district. So this was kind of like the first big fight of the NAACP in South Carolina, was get Black teachers hired in Black schools. And then they mentioned teacher salary equalization, which of course was to get Black teachers equal salaries to white teachers. Of course, salary is still a big issue with school teachers. And they kept mentioning this woman named Gloria Rackley, who I had never heard of. And she kind of turned out to be this really kick-ass civil rights activist who was involved in a number of pieces of litigation, as well as multiple direct action protests. And of course, those things got her fired from her job. So when I started taking a closer look, I realized that there were many of these school teachers, and it really spanned across the 20th century. And yeah, it's a topic that I did not intend to be relevant this far into the 21st century, but it turns out that it is.
Yeah, shockingly relevant.
Shockingly and disgustingly.
Do you, when you're teaching your students, you know, how are they reacting to learning about the past, realizing that it's all coming back again? Like, what are the reactions of current students to this kind of, you know, sort of past repeating itself?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I'm always, as a professor, like, I'm very wary of doing too many past and present comparisons. Mostly because, you know, I don't want to fall into the things haven't changed trap, you know, even though I totally get that also. So, but I think what's interesting is that I don't have to make those comparisons. Students do. Right? Students do it all on their own. So students often see comparisons with leaders from the past and leaders in the present. And one of the things I learned when I was first started teaching college, I started in South Carolina at USC. And one of the things I learned was that there's a lot of value in teaching state history and local history. I never forget the case that I talked about on the Unsung History podcast was a case in 1956. Lots of teachers lose their jobs in response to this piece of legislation that basically says teachers can't be members of the NAACP in South Carolina. But 21 teachers at the same school lost their job. And so this kind of made the Black media circuit. And it's in this tiny little town called Ellery, South Carolina. If you haven't heard of it, it's because there's nothing there. And I mean, you'll miss it. It's like an exit. It's like 2 exits on the interstate, maybe. And I remember teaching this. I've now made it kind of part of my lectures when I teach US history, second half of US history. And like, I'll never forget, I had a student come up to me after class one day talking about that case. And he said, you know, I'm from Ellery and it's the same way now. Now he was talking from a slightly different perspective. He was Hispanic. But you know, it sort of taught me that there was a great deal of value in sort of bringing those cases home and really kind of teaching students that this wasn't just something that was happening in Montgomery and Nashville and Birmingham. This was happening all over the US and certainly all over the US South. But I think that's probably one of the things, particularly with, you know, there's been a lot of talk about what should and shouldn't be taught in the classroom. I think one of the most shocking things people who have those fears would learn is that, at least in my experience, I'm not the one who's making those comparisons. I'm not the one who's saying not enough has changed. You know, those are my students. They're coming to those conclusions all on their own. All of their learning is just an unvarnished depiction of the past. You know.
Yeah, I feel like once they get yeah, I feel like, you know, you protect them because that's what they think they're doing, even though we know that's not the case. But this idea of like, you're shielding these students, particularly white students, from this history. And it's like, you think they're not going to learn that when they get to college just because you've banned it from, you know, elementary, middle, high school. Like, that it's history and it's there, and they're going to find out about it one way or another, whether that's from a TV program or a documentary or their college classes. So, you know, I feel like a lot of parents don't realize just how, I don't like to use the word resilient, but like students learn and they get upset that they haven't been taught these things. And this idea that you're upsetting the white students, they feel guilty. And it's like, first of all, if they have nothing to do with this and they don't believe in this, they have nothing to feel guilty about, right? So if you're feeling guilty, you might want to talk to your therapist. But, you know, it's just this idea that we're not giving students enough credit for their own critical thinking and their own abilities to make those connections with history. And I think that's really unfortunate and unfair to the students, especially.
Yeah, I think I shared, there was a really great opinion piece on a woman wrote, I think it may have been on Medium. And she actually used this word therapy. She's like, history is not a therapy session. You know, it's not intended to make you feel good. That's not the point of it. That said, you know, I've never had a student run out of my classroom in tears, right? Like they're very capable of handling this, right? And I'm mostly talking about, you know, when I talk about teaching a U.S. history class, I'm mostly talking about people who are just out of high school. So they're not far removed from that particular experience. But yeah, students can handle this. There's certainly something to be said for how you teach a difficult story in 3rd grade versus 12th grade. I mean, that's a perfectly relevant conversation. But, you know, teachers have, I don't know if you'll know this, but teachers actually receive a special education and training and certification to do this. And so they kind of know, and they kind of know how to teach this. If we could just, you know, trust them to do their jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and, you know, I was going to say, I don't want to get too political, but you know, you study politics in in the past, so perhaps that's unavoidable. But you teach in Florida now. So what is it like on the ground in Florida? And I realize, you know, not all of this legislation they're trying to pass would necessarily affect colleges, but, you know, it's part of the sort of culture of trying to stifle what is being taught. And so, you know, how does that feel right now in Florida? And, you know, how are you and other teachers reacting to it?
Well, I mean, it's scary. I mean, first of all, I don't know if people really realize how ignorant students arrive in the classroom. So, and these are, and I'm talking about good students. Like, I'm not talking about students who barely made it out of high school, right? I'm talking about students who made A's and B's. So, right, so you're already kind of dealing with a deficit, right? I've had students who thought that enslaved people got paid, right? I've had students who thought whites were enslaved. I've had students who thought the wage slavery that occurred in the Northeast was the same as, you know, the kind of actual slavery that we saw happening in the Southeast. Right. So we're already kind of dealing with a deficit, and that's kind of with students and teachers sort of doing their best before all of this happened. And of course, you know, what's the other thing that's scary is the possibility that the college classroom does not remain free of this. I can't teach US history without talking about race and gender and sexuality, class, and all of those kind of uncomfortable topics. It's not really a possibility. So kind of on the ground, it feels scary, and it also is difficult to figure out how to protect teachers who are oftentimes really trying to just do their best, but are already feeling very targeted, right? Even though this has just started, they're already feeling very targeted.
Yeah, I'm often kind of astonished at what students come into classes thinking, or what they've been taught, especially because, like for now, I'm not teaching in a traditional classroom setting like I was a few years ago. I teach on part-time for Southern New Hampshire online, and it's a set curriculum, you know, and you're just going through the motions kind of thing. But I really like the colonial New England class I teach, for example, because they introduced the students to slavery in colonial New England. And every term I get students who are like, I had no idea that slavery existed in New England. I had no idea that this was an issue. And I also get a lot of students comparing the indentured servants who came over from Europe with the enslavement of Africans and indigenous peoples. And it's always a little difficult to kind of like, how do you break that idea in a way that is educational, not political, but like, it's not the same, right? They're not the same thing. And I don't know, I feel like we do what we can as educators, and students either take it or they don't. But I feel like for the most part, I've found that students are very willing to kind of get uncomfortable and challenge their own kind of preset ideas, which I think is really important, because I know I went through that coming from the South and going to college, coming from a kind of impoverished background where it was a not so subtly racist town, and that challenge is hard, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, and so Jamie, by the way, I call those the struggle wars, like the kind of who had it worse wars. And I always like to, just remind students that it's just not even like a useful, to me, it's not a useful conversation. Like, was the Holocaust worse? Was slavery worse? It's not a useful conversation, right? It was all pretty crappy and sort of rooted in, unfortunately, some very similar things. But yes, so I like to, I always like to kind of just start with, that is not a useful conversation for us to even bother trying to have. Although I get why people sometimes, I get it, people want to have it sometimes. I forgot, I thought I was gonna say something else, but I forgot.
It reminds me of my therapist was like, it's not the trauma Olympics.
Yes.
Like, you cannot compare two situations and try to determine who had it worse, because they're two different situations rooted in two different historical moments. Because like, I'm going through PTSD therapy, and she's like, what happened to you may not have been as bad as what happened to somebody else, but it does not negate the trauma that you experienced. And so by trying to compare it, it's not useful, and it's not accurate either. So it's not an accurate comparison to make.
Yeah, like your pain is real, even if it looks different compared to someone else. And that could be like a hard, I think that's an important lesson though, even just kind of like a life lesson, because I think, quite frankly, especially as women, we are accustomed to being like, well, I'm supposed to be helpful, right? I'm supposed to be of service, and this other person has it much, much, much worse than I do, so I should just not complain. But it's like, no, you're allowed to kind of live your truth and be open about it. And so that's kind of a good way to approach history, I think, right? These different stories, they may be, like we said, we're in these different historical moments, and they may look a bit different, but they're all kind of relevant, and there's obviously something for us to learn from them.
So I want to switch gears to an equally difficult topic, and then maybe we'll talk some lighter stuff too. But we have the good news, the recent Supreme Court nomination of Katanji Brown Jackson, who seems absolutely incredible. But I noticed you had posted something on Twitter about how you could imagine Black and brown people all over the country, especially women, sort of understanding this. You got to be better than everybody else to get to this position. And of course, now there's these sort of terrible, terrible racist attacks on her. Not surprising, but terrible. So I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on sort of this historic moment and what it means, but then how we can sort of all understand. Maybe not understand what she's going through, but like sort of get, what she has had to do to get to this position, and now to sort of face these attacks a little bit.
Yeah, it was just something that's kind of dawned on me. I mean, this is something that a lot of Black and brown children heard growing up, especially my parents and older generation, right? You have to be better than everyone else. Like being as good as everyone else is not good enough. And so pop culture reference for those who watch that TV show Scandal is this really great episode where I think she's like in an airplane hangar and her daddy Pope shows up and he's like, well, what did I tell you? And she's like, I have to be better than everyone else, right? That kind of reminded me of that moment. Like, here's this woman who is objectively speaking better qualified than, I don't know, the last 5 people appointed to the US Supreme Court, has clearly more experience, has clearly a better education, has more varied experience. And yet the only thing people can think about is the fact that, well, why did he have to say that she's going to appoint a Black woman? You know, so, right. And yet at the same time, it's clearly this historic moment. And I've noticed also, like on the one hand, like we see these attacks and we also see like establishment people actually on both sides of the aisle who are kind of like, yeah, I'm not going to go down that road because that's going to clearly be very ugly and detrimental to my career. But yeah, it's just kind of this, and it reminded me of, you know, the degree to which the world we live in is altering so drastically. And, you know, I just kind of wonder to what degree is that going to be reflected in things like US Supreme Court nominations? I mean, if we're talking statistically, right? Statistically, in this country, Black women are the best educated group, best educated demographic group. Why would, so actually, right? So actually US Supreme Court should be like 80% based on that. It should look completely different. And so you kind of wonder, like, when is the rest of these institutions, you know, when are they going to catch up with reality? Not just in terms of actual racial demographics, but also in terms of, like, you know, the people who are going to college, the people who are becoming entrepreneurs, the people who are the best educated. That's a group that's starting to look very different, not just in terms of Black women, but also in terms of, I think, the rapid increase of Hispanic students, right? I mean, and the number of those students who are also first-gen students. I mean, if you want to see someone who's like almost guaranteed to be successful post-college, that's who you look at. That's who you look at. That's the person who has like the most drive, the most ambitions, the most willing to kind of work hard. And I say that as someone who's worked with a lot of first-gen students. So I don't know, it was just that kind of moment that dawned on me, like, oh, interesting. Interesting that you guys are objecting to her when, like, objectively speaking, she's clearly the best qualified person that you come up with for this job, other than someone who's already in the position.
Oh, I'd say she's better prepared than several of the people who are already in the position. So should we switch to a little bit lighter? We've been really heavy. They've been good, but it's been heavy. So I would like to hear about shoes.
Yes.
So I know that you like shoes, and I would love to know a little bit about what kinds of shoes you like to wear or collect.
So I've been, like, especially since teaching college and like walking across, this is now like kind of third university I've been at, and you know, there's always going to be at least 1 to 2 classes each semester that you're walking across campus for. So I've been really into sneakers lately, and I was doing it before we all saw Kamala doing it, just to be clear, okay? But like wearing my cute sneakers with my work clothes, loving Adidas, really love Adidas Superstars. I really love, like, you know, all of them that have like the kind of vintage feel to them. I think that's like the main thing. The other shoes that I'm really into, and they're great for Florida, particularly in South Florida, is I'm really into Rothy's because, well, A, they're sustainable, so they're good for the environment. They're actually made from plastic bottles. And also you can throw the whole shoe into the washer machine, which is really great if you're, quite frankly, in a hot, humid climate where your feet are gonna sweat, sorry. So those, like, I think those are kind of like the two main shoes I'm into right now. Funnily enough, like I haven't bought a pair of heels in probably, well, since the pandemic. Because where am I gonna go?
You don't just wear heels walking your dog.
Around the house.
I second the Rothy's. I have a pair of Rothy's. I will admittedly, I keep the nice shoes under my desk at work and I walk in sneakers and change. But I have red pointy flats that are Rothy's and I put them on and I feel like I'm like the fanciest person ever. This is like the fanciest shoes I have owned. And they're just plastic water bottles, but they look super fancy.
I have a problem when it comes to Rothy's. It started out, I got a pair of leopard print pointed flats and I was like, these are awesome. They're comfortable. Love throwing them in the washing machine, especially when we got slobbery dogs getting their gross stuff all over them. Then it was like, all right, well, the leopard print are cute, but they don't match everything. So I need to get like a solid pair. So I got a solid pair. And then I was like, oh, I want to try the round toe flats. And so I got a pair of those. And I was like, well, these are really cute, but they're bright yellow. So I need to get, you know, something more muted. And it's turned into, I have the loafers. I have the slippers, the house slippers from Rothy's. Like, what am I doing? I'm walking around the house. I don't need a $120 pair of slippers for the house.
Jamie, though, I was just thinking the other day that I wish Rothy's made house slippers. And so now that you told me they do.
Yeah, my husband bought them for me for Christmas. They are divine. Yeah. Yeah. I feel bad because like he bought me a pair of Louis Vuittons last Christmas. And this pandemic, I have not had an opportunity to wear them anywhere. Like, I was like,
Again,
you want me to wear them on my sweatpants? Like,
walking the dogs is the perfect time.
Oh, I don't walk my dogs. That does not happen. First of all, they don't like walking. They're weird. But also trying to handle the two of them by myself is, yeah. Last time I tried to do that, I almost broke my toe. So. Yeah.
So wearing stiletto heels wouldn't be.
Oh no, that would be bad news bears.
Interesting. I do also have a pair of teaks, which seems like around the same time that everybody started wearing Rothy's, everybody started wearing teaks. And I like them. They're blue and they're comfy, but I feel like they're wearing out. They're leather, so they're not as sort of durable as the plastic water bottles. And I feel like they're wearing out much more quickly, and they're more expensive because they're leather. So it's like I don't know. They're cute though.
I mean, it's a little thing that makes you happy, and like they say, it's cheaper than therapy.
Yes, but what if you're doing shoes plus therapy?
You're just that much more happy.
I was gonna say, I'm fortunate that my therapy is covered by insurance, so I'm really only paying for the one thing, and that is the shoes. So
it's like 2 for 1.
Yeah. My husband used to complain about how many shoes I had, and then he like started to get nicer shoes for himself, and that's when he was like, I get it. Yeah.
I will say I have fewer shoes now than like I did in my 20s, because I would have like the cute, trendy, but cheap, basically fast fashion shoes. And now like Jamie, I want like the nicer shoes, and I'd rather just wait and get maybe my 2 to 4 pairs of shoes per year versus like I was getting 2 to 4 pairs of shoes a month.
I mean, you're getting fewer shoes and they're sustainable. So I think it's an obligation. You have to do it.
It's true. I'm actually helping the environment.
That's how that works, right? Let's just keep telling ourselves.
Yeah. Well, I got to a point where I realized like I have officially reached mid-30s when I was like, I no longer can shop at like Target or buy stuff on Amazon because it's just, it falls apart. It's crap. Yes, it's cheap and cute, but like, especially Target right now, I don't know. I haven't been in a few months, but the last few times that I've tried to shop at Target, it has been like granny chic. And I'm just not into that style. So I'm like, what am I supposed to buy? Like, I don't need a dress that looks like my great grandmother's muumuu. Like, that might be cute on like a size 00, like 18-year-old, but like on me, it looks like an actual moo-moo. So it's like, when did I get to this point in my life?
Yeah, I bought this cute t-shirt at Target last month. They had like some Black History Month stuff. And then I got home and really looked at it. And I realized they'd spelled Phyllis wrong for Phyllis Wheatley. And so I had to return it. And I was like, okay, well, I tried. Yeah, they spelled it wrong.
Yikes.
Like, how does it get from design to production through marketing and nobody realized, like, oh, we have spelled the name of this incredibly important person incorrectly. We should probably fix that. Like, how does it make it that far?
It means that no one even searched Google, because it's not hard to find out. It's not like a big secret.
No.
And we're back around to needing better education.
At least on how to use a
search engine.
At the very least.
That wouldn't be a bad class for some people to take.
Very true.
Yes, indeed. So I do want to, we have run out of time a couple times, but I would like to ask our audience if they have any questions for Candace or for any of us, really, because I think that Candace is just a terrific guest, and so we are excited to just pick her brain about everything. But in the meantime, I think we can keep talking and see if they come up with any questions. But I do, since we started talking about climate a little bit, sorry, I'm going to bring it back to a heavy topic. I do also want to know, since we have a Florida resident on with us, just a little bit about, so there's these like scary climate reports that came out again the other day. They keep coming out. And I think a lot about the places that are going to be impacted first. And that, it's not like it's far off anymore. It's here, and it's, sort of right in our faces. So I guess I'm just wondering, sort of in Florida, and especially among like the college population, is this something that people sort of see and recognize? Are you seeing the effects of it firsthand at all? Or does it still feel like people are sort of like, that's a future problem. Just like Miami will be underwater someday, but that's okay.
I mean, I think people, well, if you look at the real estate market, clearly people don't think this is going to happen anytime soon, because it's crazy here. I mean, it's crazy everywhere. But like crazy just in terms of like the amount of available real estate and how quickly it is rising in price. Yeah, it's so funny. Like, okay, so I bought a house May of last year, and I mostly bought it for financial reasons. So because as the prices of real estate rise, so do the rent. And it was like, I mean, I can either live paycheck to paycheck, or I can make a down payment and like own a house. So 2 months later, I get a flyer in the mail for another house in my neighborhood. Now, I want to clarify, the houses in my neighborhood are all exactly the same. So it's not like, oh, well, your house is made of wood and their house is made of brick. No, they're the exact same house. 2 months later, that house was $20,000 more than my house. Now, I don't know what the final sale price is, but based on my experience buying my house, I'm guessing that it sold for at or very near, maybe even more than that price. So clearly people are like buying this stuff up like crazy. And then Florida is also very interesting just in terms of people's belief systems. There are certainly climate deniers even here in Florida, which of course is a bit surprising. I think, kind of what's most unfortunate is that obviously the most, I guess, impacted group is going to be sort of the least financially prepared, right, to deal with the situation. And so what is that going to look like, particularly as that more recent study came out, which basically said it's not coming, it's here, right? Climate change is very much here and moving far faster than we originally thought that it was. We have less time than we thought we were going to have. So yeah, and of course, college students are always interesting, right? They always have a much more kind of broader perspective. So I don't know. It's like it's not looking good in terms of widespread awareness, which of course sucks because it's a peninsula.
I don't know if you guys watched Don't Look Up, and I wouldn't say I loved the movie, but
Oh.
it does very much feel like feel like that. Like, oh, it's right here coming at us. We can see it, but it's not really there.
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, I really enjoyed it. My husband really enjoyed it. A lot of people were like, oh, it's too campy or too cheesy or it's exaggerated. And I'm like, having been in classes with students or seeing my husband's classes, he's in poli-sci. Yeah, no, it's not exaggerated at all.
That's how I felt about The Chair. Like I watched maybe 2 episodes and I was like, it's just a little bit too close to home. Like the acting is amazing, the script is great, but this just feels too real to me.
Yeah.
So I couldn't finish it. I was like, I need something else other than reality in my life.
So we do have a question from Brad for Candace. So what is a term or idea in your work that you wish people had a better definition of? So if there was something that you study that people understood a little bit better, they would understand then sort of all of your work better.
That's a good question. There is something that's like niggling at the back of my mind, and I'm having trouble thinking of the right way to describe it. So I think one of the kind of questions people ask when thinking about school teachers is, in particular, the way that the relationship between teachers and the community sort of changes over time. Quite frankly, it actually alters quite drastically after desegregation. And before, kind of during segregation, particularly when you have Black teachers in Black schools and Black neighborhoods, they live in that neighborhood, they work in that neighborhood, they have these direct relationships with the community members. There's a give and take, right? There's expectations on both sides of that relationship. And that sort of shifts when school teachers no longer live in their community, or they don't live in the community they teach. I think you can see that right now. I mean, most school teachers are driving into whatever neighborhood they're teaching in. They're not typically like a member of that neighborhood. And so it changes kind of the relationship that they have with their community. Trying to figure out what I would call that though, actually, in the first place. But actually this example that Brad came up with, these images like working class, I think what middle class means, particularly for my the group of people I'm talking about, which is Black school teachers. And on the one hand, this is a group of people who's among the best educated in their community. They are not exactly the best paid, but they're certainly the most, I would say, most consistently paid, right? You can make more money working in many factories than being a school teacher, but your factory work might only last for a few months, whereas you're going to get that same teaching position more than likely year after year after year. And they seem to embody a certain type of respectability politics. But at the same time, when I mention Black middle class, I'm mentioning something that looks different from white middle class. These teachers are not only paid the low wages of teachers, but they're paid the lower wages of Black teachers, and even the lower wages of Black teachers in the South. They are certainly among the best educated, but their educational opportunities are often limited, particularly for institutions of higher education are desegregated. People either had maybe one or two in-state options, maybe one or two private Black colleges, more than likely just one state-run HBCU. And so oftentimes people had to go out of state if they wanted to get like a master's or PhD, certainly a law degree, things like that. So, kind of when I mention Black middle class, I'm really talking about a social status that may not necessarily transfer over to an economic status. And the reason that's so important in my research is all of the school teachers in my study, all of them from World War I to 1970s, all of them, without exception, lose their jobs. All of them are dismissed. Some of them are dismissed outright. Some of them are simply not rehired. Their contracts aren't renewed. And so what does that mean for an educated Black woman in the US Jim Crow South to lose her job? Well, it means she didn't have any other opportunities because typically speaking, college educated Black women became either school teachers or nurses. And obviously nursing is a very particular type of training that one would have to receive. And so kind of understanding that is important because this group of people primarily comprised of women. When they risked their livelihood, they were also risking being blacklisted and risking the possibility of ever being able to do that type of work again without relocating. Yeah, that's one one term that I feel like I sometimes have to explain to make sure people understand.
Yeah, it's I remember when we were talking on Unsung History that was the thing that sort of really struck me is, even if these women seem relatively privileged, perhaps compared to some other parts of their community, that their choices are so limited that really makes it difficult. And the bravery that they had then in standing up to some of these really racist policies is just extraordinary because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and like when you look at what so many of these teachers were doing, I mean, they were really the intellectuals of their time period.
Mm-hmm.
They were researching, and they're writing, they were publishing, and they're talking to the media, and really kind of using the media in a way that we saw kind of more broadly being used in the 1960s civil rights movement. But they're kind of the thinkers of their time. Very much the community leaders, but the degrees to which that translated into income is questionable. And unfortunately, that has not changed for school teachers. I really think there's an argument to be made that you'll never fix the public education system without fixing the salary issue of school teachers, because why stay in that job? I think my mother is actually a really great example. My mom was a chemistry school teacher, high school teacher, so high school chemistry. She really loved it. In fact, she loved it so much, she actually went back to that part-time, like in her, I guess it must have been her mid to late 40s. She really loved being in the classroom. She loved working with children. But she left her job because it turns out chemistry teachers can sometimes score very well on the MCAT and get accepted to medical school. Well, I mean, that's not a hard one to figure out, no matter how much you love your job. But what if she'd been what if she'd been making a better wage? Like, what if the difference between what that school teacher and what that doctor was making was sort of negligible? Mm-hmm. You would have had yet another passionate person, committed to the classroom. But I feel like that happens so often. And the fix is kind of simple. It's not that complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I college professors do generally get paid more than K through 12 teachers. Like that's pretty obvious, but like it didn't hit me until I was talking to some of my students when I was teaching full time that they were leaving a 4-year degree, entering the workforce and making 30-50% more than I was making at the time. And I was like, I've been in school for how long? And what? Like, I clearly did not think this through as a first generation poor college kid. I was always like, oh man, professors must make so much money. And then I got there and I was like, oh, I severely miscalculated. So, and it sucks because like, I love teaching, like that's all I ever wanted to do. And I couldn't sustain it. It was not sustainable with the amount of student loan debt that I had and, you know, the cost of living and all of that. So I was like, well, sorry guys, government work is a little bit more secure and pays a lot better. So.
And Jamie, the number of like first gen students I know who've made the decision on what they were going to do for a living based on the fact that they were going to be accruing this massive amount of debt, right? So again, you have like this kind of incredibly hardworking, ambitious group of people who could be going into things that they're really passionate about and instead feel like, well, if I'm going to be accruing this amount of debt, then I have to go into this or I have to go into that. This thing that's going to guarantee I make a certain amount of money. And, you know, first of all, if your priority is to make a lot of money, there is nothing wrong with that. Okay, do it and give me a grant. But if you know, the door should be open for people to feel like they can graduate from college, pursue their passion, and pay off their student loan debt. Those things should not be, you know, vastly different.
Yeah, when I was graduating college in 2000, it was the height of people being hired to be consultants and investment bankers. That was like the big thing. And so many people I knew from college who went into those fields. And I was like, you're going to be miserable and you're going to be working like 80 hours a week. Why are you doing that? And, you know, I didn't realize till later that I was speaking from a position of privilege, that I didn't have to go into one of those professions. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of you know, and then what are those people doing? They're just making money for other people to make more money. You know, like we have this really bizarre system in this country of which things we prioritize with salaries that are commensurate to what they should be. Yes. And even some of them can't make the money they should be making, like baseball players. Because the owners make even more money and want to keep it.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, it's also so interesting, right? Because baseball players are able to have this conversation because they have a labor union. Right? It's like so many professions, you know, or particularly, you know, just depending on where you are in the country, your particular profession may not have that. Yeah. That's actually one of the interesting things I thought about with my research, right? School teachers in South Carolina did not have labor unions. South Carolina is not a place that was very open or is very open to labor unions. And so you had them using a combination of their teachers association and the NAACP to try to, this really clear partnership that was built between their Black Teachers Association, which was the Palmetto Education Association, and the NAACP. Right, so the Teachers Association oftentimes fund these civil rights suits. They would raise the money, but they couldn't have their name on the dotted line, right? Because they couldn't be identified as a labor union, and that was one of the things they lost when teachers associations were first forced to merge with the White Teachers Association. So they no longer had this group that was sort of raising money explicitly for civil rights cases. Yeah, so I mean, that's what happens when you kind of lose the possibility of a labor union, right? You don't have someone sort of arguing for you, saying, even if I'm making these hundreds of thousands of dollars, I still am not making nearly as what I'm bringing in for the owners of my baseball team.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jamie, should we do your favorite segment?
Yes, yes. So at the end of each episode, we like to ask our guests, and then we give our recommendations to the audience. And it can be anything. It could be your favorite cocktail, your favorite book, your favorite candle scent. I don't know, like your favorite Funko Pop, like what you like. Yeah, just what would you recommend to the audience that you're either enjoying or you think they'd enjoy?
Oh, okay. This is totally like, clearly I'm a woman who's not in her 20s. If you have not already, people, get yourself an air fryer. It is, first of all, it's the best way to reheat pizza. And also just like so much deliciousness that comes out of them. So much deliciousness. One of my favorite things to make, air fried chickpeas. I know it sounds crazy, super delicious. Yeah, get yourself an air fryer, folks.
Oh yeah, air fried Brussels sprouts.
Oh my God, so good.
So good.
Air fried asparagus is shockingly good.
Yes. Also, we tried air fried shishito peppers to just eat as like an appetizer. You just cook them up and eat them, and they're wow, so good.
So good. And you feel less guilty about the French fries and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, indeed.
I'm like, it's just a vegetable now.
So I think I've already recommended the series I was reading, the Beatrice Hyde Clare series of novels. I think I recommended them last time, but then I read all 9 of them. So strong recommendation from me. I'm not sure when the next one's coming out, but I will be eagerly awaiting. So I have moved on now to the next series of cozy mystery novels set in Victorian England, which I'm clearly a big fan. So I'm reading The Dickinson Sisters. It's by Blythe Baker. And so this is also set in early Victorian England, not in London, so it's slightly different. But the other thing that makes it a little bit different is that the 2 main characters actually work. They're seamstresses. So very often in these cozy mysteries, the woman who ends up being the detective is like a lady or the younger sister of royalty, or like something. Often she's like down in her luck or whatever, but they're never allowed to work because they're ladies. But these women are seamstresses, and it's very exciting to see people actually working. So that is my current mystery series that I am going to recommend. I will do one more recommendation, and that is that well, the people who are currently live on the show with us may already know this, but everybody who's watching this on YouTube, my sons do a show called Something in Particular with Teddy and Arthur. And it's not quite every Saturday, but most Saturdays we'll do a live show. And they talk to a grown-up for half an hour to an hour about something that the grown-up is interested in. So they have had an episode on Lord of the Rings with Brad Summer. They did an episode on Star Trek. They did an episode on the Cold War. So they've done some really interesting topics. They have one coming up this coming Saturday on Harriet Tubman, because it is her 200th birthday. So it's really fun, and people should check it out. So Something in Particular with Teddy and Arthur.
I love it. It's so cute. Okay. Okay, so I have a couple. The first is it is a pair of yoga socks by Ozaiic, Ozaiic. I found them on Amazon, and I was like, well, they're not that expensive. I'll give them a try. They are very comfortable. They've got the grippies on the bottom, so I like to wear them around the house since I tend to slip and slide everywhere. So amazing. Love them. I would also recommend getting yourself a sister-in-law who comes to visit you and makes you baked ziti. And also, it is Women's History Month. So one of my favorite podcasts is by a couple of girls in Baltimore who I got to meet. They're awesome. It's called HERstory on the Rocks, and it's just The two of them drinking cocktails that they've designed specifically in honor of the two women that they tell their live stories. They post the recipes early in the week so that you can make the cocktails and drink them as you're listening to the podcast. But yeah, HERstory on the rocks. You gotta check them out.
Awesome. Well, Candace, thank you so much for joining us. This was it was a lot of fun, even though there were some heavy subjects, but it was good and it was fun, and we're so glad you joined us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.